Hey everybody, Karen from Master Spirit Guides. I hope you're doing well today. This is Coffee with Karen, but I do not have my coffee mug. We are getting ready. Go Badgers! Yes, I'm wearing the same shirt because, and I am actually recording this today, the day you're going to hear this. But I have to wear my red shirt again today because the Badgers are winning. They're in the semifinals of the Big Ten tournament basketball. So we're going to go and watch them. And it was very fun yesterday, even though we thought for sure they were going to lose, which actually is what makes it fun. So, okay. So thank you so much for anyone who's been joining me for this little series. This is part 3. So I'm always going to the beginning of the series, give you a little rundown of what we're talking about in case you're just joining now. It's totally okay to, it's totally okay to just listen to this conversation, not even go back to the first 2. Or if this inspires you, you may want to go back to part 1 and 2. Okay. I will go ahead and put the part 1 and 2, the end screen videos here at the end of this video. So just to get us started, a few days ago, I shared a journal entry that I wrote while I was trying to process something that has been on my mind lately. All right. I was reflecting on how to stay spiritually grounded and aligned with peace while also becoming more aware of some of the darker entities that exist in the world. So that's been my challenge because I've been sort of like my whole life just not looking at the darker entities. I've been looking at them from a surface level, but not like really digging into them because I just didn't want to because it scared me. So for most of my life, I really avoided looking at those things. I didn't want to study evil, talk about evil, or try to understand it because it scared me. So I focused on the good in the world and try to live my life from that place. But recently, as more and more conversations and information are surfacing online, not on social media, but mostly on YouTube is where I'm getting my information, which I do believe, I have been able to find what I consider to be credible sources looking for the truth. Nobody knows the entire truth about stuff. So all you can do is get some information here and there and piece it together the best that you can, right? So, yeah, I'm not on social media. I never really have been. I did have a Facebook account, but after the last election and what happened with with the billionaires and stuff, I just deleted my Facebook account, my Instagram account, never really was on them anyways. So, again, as I've been hearing more and more conversations and information that are surfacing, I found myself becoming aware of things that I had never really examined before. Some of those things right now, some of you know, is like MK Ultra, and I never even heard the word Zionist before, so I didn't understand that or what the connections. I never really understood what our support of Israel was. And not that I don't support the Jewish people, but I never understood the connection our governments had. So I'm finding that to be intriguing. And all the Epstein stuff, right? That is pretty evil shit going on, right? So this whole thing of wanting to stay involved in the conversation, but finding it extremely difficult to face the darker parts of humanity has created this tension for me. Okay. And many of you have said it's created that tension for you too. So the tension has been, how do we stay rooted in light while also becoming aware of difficult realities that exist in the world? That's really the question that started this whole series. Okay. And I started with the whole journaling entry that I put into AI, and then AI spit out some ways to look at it, which then inspired this conversation. I thought I would share it. And in part 1, I read my whole journal entry to you. So in the first couple parts of this conversation, we talked about awareness itself. We talked about the idea of observing without absorbing. And we talked about how the internet can sometimes amplify the darkest corners of humanity in a way that can make the world feel heavier than our everyday lives actually are. And that's really important. I've been noticing that in the tension for myself. Because I even put in my journal entry, like I look outside the window and I'm like, looks pretty peaceful out there, you know? So because when, oh, it's funny. I should just stop talking and read. Because when you look outside your own window, most people are simply living their lives. Yeah. But then you find out, then you find out stuff that's going on underneath the surface, right? And then you're like, well, I don't know. Are people really living their lives, or is shit going on that I don't even know about? You know what I mean? But, I mean, we can't change the whole world, but it does make you start seeing, I'm seeing things so differently now. I'm hearing conversations so differently now. When I watch shows, I'm seeing them so differently now, which I'm watching way less because I have less tolerance for what looks to me like the manipulation and the brainwashing that we've been going through for the last 50 years. So it's interesting. It's some interesting stuff. I'm over the horror of it right at this moment, but so I can call it interesting, but it hasn't felt interesting to me. It's felt horrifying, actually. So again, people look like they're living their simple lives, right? If you just look out your window, you go shopping or whatever, you go to the grocery store. But when you go online, it can sometimes feel like the entire world is collapsing into chaos. So today I want to continue exploring 2 ideas that came out of that journal reflection. And just a reminder, I am collecting, like in part 2, I talked about comments that people had from part 1. So please leave your comments. And I will be, when we come back tomorrow and have continuing conversation about this, I'll be taking your comments from part 2 and 3. Okay. So one of the thoughts that surfaced while I was journaling was curiosity about corruption is not the same thing as participating in it, of course. So just being curious about corruption is not the same thing as participating in it. That's what AI said to me, because I was questioning my energy around it, basically. Okay. So that obviously that message was helpful for me, because I noticed that when I started asking questions about certain things happening in the world, whether it's political systems, institutional power, corruption, or different events happening globally, or even the history we've been taught, that's some of it is not accurate. And who actually I mean, I know the information to some of this stuff now, the factual information. I know who actually created our textbooks for school and who backs that. So we don't really know if we've been taught anything that was accurate. I'm understanding that what we were taught about World War II isn't fully, not that each part of it, there's truth to each part of it, but not fully to the extent. And some things were left out. So it's really mind-boggling to know now, is what I'm sensing, and I think a lot of us are, that we have to question every single thing we have ever been taught. And if that's not a mind F, I don't know what is. And I'm down for it. I'm down for it as long as I can stay level, as long as I can observe without absorbing. But that's easier said than done if you spiral, because your whole life of everything you've ever believed, every conversation you've ever had was based on something that actually wasn't based on truth. And that, and many of you have probably used the Bible to be your truth, which is amazing. At least you had a tool to do that. I didn't do that. So for many reasons, for other reasons that we won't talk about now, that I've mentioned throughout, everybody has, a lot of people, if you don't have religious trauma, many people do. So just keep that in mind, okay? That's a thing, and that I would consider that being part of my history, all right? So I have always stayed away from that, which is why I talk more on the spiritual level, not specifically a religion. That's part of that. Okay. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. I'm still learning. I mean, we're going to be learning the rest of our lives, but my eyes are so much wider open now than 6 months ago. And from 6 months ago, like 6 months ago to today, my eyes are wider open than they have been my entire 56 years of life. So if that's the true for you too, whatever age you are, can you imagine what your nervous system has had to deal with? Right? So when we talked about observing without absorbing, that's much easier said than done, unless your eyes have been wide open this whole time to what is actual truth about things, So it's funny because I listened to this one guy. He's I can't remember the name of his channel. Well, I'm not going to mention this because it's okay coming from him. Well, he's Asian and he's American Asian. He's American, but he lives in Hong Kong. Okay. And he talks about the markets and stuff like that. And I like listening to him. He's so calm. He always says, does anyone else listen to him? He says, when he first starts his videos, he said, I hope you're all having a blessed Saturday. It's just so peaceful. And he's not a fear monger. He's not a grifter at all when it comes to talking about finances. So I'll post his link below because now you're maybe curious if you want to listen to it, but I'll post it below if you want to check him out. Anyways, he's Asian and he says, I can even see more than you guys can see and my eyes are slanted. He's like, you have wider eyes to see things and I'm seeing things, So he did a really good video. In fact, I'll post this video today. He did a really good video on the Iran war. And what he does is he looks at geopolitical stuff and he's extremely educated and he knows where to look for the actual information. So he talks about the geopolitical stuff, then also talks about the finances related to it. He is a trader, so that doesn't work for me. Like, I'm not a trader, but he does have a group that you can get in on Discord, but he keeps it really small, so he only opens it every once, but he doesn't charge for it. And that's how you know he's not a grifter. Like, he just really wants people to have the information. So he's very credible in my eyes. See, that's the kind of stuff you got to look for, right? And it's funny because like we charge for our membership, but we're making a living doing this. He makes a living trading. So then he shares as part of like being a good steward of the world, he's sharing the information because he makes this money trading where we make our money having these conversations right on YouTube, my sister and my two nephews and I. So that's why we have a very small fee, I think, for our membership and stuff. So thank you for your support. We appreciate it. So, curiosity about corruption is not the same thing as participating in it was the advice that Mabel gave me. Because I noticed again that when I started asking questions about certain things happening in the world, whether it's political systems, institutional power, corruption, and different events happening globally, there was a part of me that felt uneasy just by questioning it. All right. I almost felt like by looking at those things, I might somehow be inviting that energy into my life, or because it would lower my vibration, that I wasn't sending the right energy out into the world, because that is a message you will get from the spiritual community, parts of it. Okay. And people leave comments about stuff like that all the time. And that's a very interesting psychological and spiritual tension. That energy thing is, how do you become aware of stuff knowing that your vibration is going to shift for a period of time? But I am finding personally that even though it sinks my vibration for a period of time, it's helping me release resistance towards what actually is happening. The clearer I get. And the more resistance I can release, my energy rises, my vibration rises. But if I can't get clear, which sacrifices my vibration for a period of time because I am absorbing it, then I will just stay in fear and chaos. I just know that is humanity. That is how we are as humans, the fight or flight. And unless we understand it, once you understand things very clearly, then you can make decisions based on that clarity. And then you know you're making decisions based on clarity so that you don't feel fear then. Even when there's chaos out there, the more clear I get, the less I'm concerned about the chaos. But if I don't get clear, I am extremely concerned about the chaos because I don't understand it. So this is what I'm just figuring out in my head. Okay. But we have this tension between what I just explained and the spiritual community, there are people who are just literally just say, ignore all of that, ignore that tension and just stay in the light. Well, I'm sorry, but as a human being who has to survive on earth as well and wants to live a comfortable life, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't intend on suffering. We probably have suffered so many times and I'm sick of it. I'm done suffering. So I intend to stay comfortable as major changes go on in the world, which they are coming. Their major changes are coming. And that's very clear. Now the astrology is saying it. People whose channel are saying it. And now it's being shown to us in a different way. And it's being discussed, like even by the person who I listed below from his channel. You can see the connection. If you watch all three, if you watch astrology, people like I listed, the person I was just talking about earlier, who lives in Singapore. And if you listen to people who channel, then you will start to see the connections that yes. And I am not going to use the word collapsing, but because collapsing is so negative, it's changing. Things are going to change in a very big way. And I can see it now. And the more clarity I get, the more prepared I can get. And then I'm not afraid. I'm like, okay, then I can observe and not absorb. Then I can observe and not absorb if I feel prepared for myself, right? And my neighbors and my family and all that. Okay. So the next series I'm going to do, I mentioned this yesterday, is with Ann Tucker. Just not the whole book, but just like a section of this of what's coming next, like literally what's coming next. We're going to talk about that in my next series. Okay. That after this one's over, I'm going to be I'm recording that at the same time. So, because she has been channeling, she talks about the flash of light and like sort of, I don't think she uses the 3 days of darkness language, but it's similar to what other people have been talking about. And her angels have been telling her some really concrete stuff for us, really concrete. And, and so it's going to be very interesting to watch how that unfolds, if it does, the way they're saying it. And it sounds like it. So the next series I'm doing is looking at the astrology around what they're saying. So join me for that. It's going to be it's very helpful for me. It's helping me get clarity, basically. So yeah. So anybody else feeling that tension, that psychological tension between what I've been talking about and the spiritual community, and neither are wrong, but neither are right either. Everybody has to find their way, because curiosity and participation. So we're talking about corruption, like you're looking at darker things. Curiosity and participation are actually two completely different things. I agree, but the energy around it, curiosity, if you just get sucked down into deep depression because of it and you can't get clarity around it, then that's not good. Then that's probably a time for you to not do that. What's happening to me is I'm actually getting clarity around it, so it's really helpful. But not everybody might be able to do that, and that's okay. And that's what you have to recognize in yourself, I think, because they could end up being the same thing, curiosity and participation in it, because the energy is probably, well, the participation in it, the energy is real darn down there. But the curiosity, I don't know that it can ever get real down there. But if you go into a deep depression because of what you're learning and you're not able to get clarity, I could see how the vibration would stay pretty low. Okay. So just be careful about that. So journalists investigate corruption. Historians study wars and different periods in human history, like Heather Cox Richardson. She's a historian, a political historian who studies wars and difficult periods in human history, which is helping us understand. If you listen to her, it helps you understand what led up to today, too. Okay. But journalists investigate the actual corruption themselves. Doctors study disease. None of these people are participating in those things, meaning doctors aren't getting disease from studying disease. Maybe. I don't know. How do we know that for a fact? Journalists aren't becoming corrupt because they investigate it. I don't know. Can't say that for a fact, but whatever. You know what I mean? Because honestly, what you focus on might, it's the energy around it. If they can come to clarity, which means they're not resisting it. They're looking at what it is, what it is. It is what it is. That's what not resisting. You don't say it's good. You don't say it's bad. It is what it is. And you make decisions from that space. That is what my understanding of is releasing resistance towards things. When you stay in resistance to things, meaning you're not saying it is what it is. Like if I saw a mob of people outside, I would react, but I could be like, okay, that is what it is. That whatever's happening right now is what it is. And I need to sit for a minute and look at it with some clarity. Before I react, what exactly is going on? And the news media has got us believing that everything that happens, like now I understand what false flag stuff is, They do that to make it look like a scenario. But see, they don't tell you the whole sides. They don't, and I saw one the other day that was so obvious. I will post this video below if you want to watch it. It was, do you guys hear about how supposedly someone from Islam or an Islamic somebody threw this thing into a New York protest? You guys got to watch the actual truth about that. And then, I mean, it's unbelievable. Because the person who's telling you the truth was actually there. And I'll show you his video below. But that's what I'm talking about. Like, once you see that with clarity, then when you're at your own protest or something, you might see things with a little bit more clarity. Now, what happened to Charlie Kirk, that was clarity too. That was actually happening, right? So this is where they want us, but the media around that situation, if you look at the news articles, even on ground news, okay, on the articles about that thing that happened in New York, they're not represented at all what actually happened. And it wasn't even an explosive. It wasn't even an explosive. It was ridiculous, actually. It's actually quite comical when you watch the video that I'm going to list for you below. Okay. I mean, it's quite comical, actually. So then the more we get clear about stuff like that, then we don't overreact. And you could tell that this guy who is publishing this video that I'm going to show you, that I'm listing for you, you can tell that he's very clear. He has no resistance around it because he has experience being in all these places because he's actively protesting fascism and stuff like that. So, I mean, and that's part of his YouTube channel too. So, but you could see even his reaction. He's like, he didn't buy it for a second. But see, we buy it because we're not there and we only hear what the media wants to tell us, or even somebody on YouTube who's not getting both sides of the story. So, but once you see that kind of thing, and again, that's not taken away from shit that does actually happen. So, but we have to realize that it not always, For instance, here's another one. I'll post this one below. I'll have to remember to post these. Geez. In Michigan, there was a synagogue that was threatened. Okay. But when you watch the video I watched, you will see that that was probably a false flag as well. So And the person who puts the story together shows a very good argument for it, the pieces of the puzzle. So it's actually, that incident is actually quite unbelievable what they try to pull off in our minds. Both of them, what they're doing right now, and I don't know who they is. I'll talk of, we're going to talk about that in the next series a little bit. Both of these incidences are trying to create fear and hatred towards Islamic states. Oh, you mean like people who live in Iran? People who don't support the state of Israel? So, okay. I'm not drawing any conclusions. I'm just telling you what I see. Okay. But it's helping me get some clarity on this, because then once you see more and more of this, you can observe without absorbing, because you're like, oh, they're just up to their games again. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. Now, when people actually do get hurt, there's that layer. These two incidences that I just mentioned, people did not get hurt. Okay. I don't think so. But when people do get hurt, and it's our actual, perhaps, allegedly, for information purposes only, entertainment purposes only, an inside job, let's say, then that is pretty effing crazy. So, which I believe is what I'm getting clarity on. This is what I'm talking about, this dark stuff that I'm talking about, right? So when you hear all that I just explained, if you're hearing that for the first time or understanding false flags for the first time, your vibration is going to sink. If you don't spend time understanding it, it's going to be hard to get it up. So I understand what the spiritual community is talking about. But as good stewards of the world, and to understand how to protect yourself and your family, which is, there's nothing wrong with that, and to protect your wealth and your belongings and whatever, and to just, so that you can live comfortably. There's nothing wrong with that. If you don't get clear, though, it might be harder, not impossible, but harder for you to do that. If you're just going to say, the world is just, oh, it always does this. We always do this. We're just going to bounce right back to where it was before. This next series I'm going to do does not sound like that's going to be the case. So that's why this is kind of leading up to that. Okay, I'll get to that probably next week. All right. So let's see, where did I leave off? So trying to understand the world does not mean you are participating in the darkness. I totally get that. But if you keep your, I'll say one more time, if you keep your vibration down here, then you are participating in the darkness, because the darkness vibration is low. So if you just think of it as vibration, all right. So that's been my challenge. And again, that's what the spiritual community, this is how I'm understanding it. The spiritual community is struggling with people who are trying to get clarity. Okay. Because they understand that this is dark stuff and it keeps your vibration low. But they have to also understand that some of us are just at the beginning, no matter how old we are, we're just at the beginning, because I literally have lived my whole life not looking at it, And so I didn't have clarity. I just did my job. I did the best I could. I saved money. I did the things I was supposed to do, that I was told to do. That was, that I was trained to do as a child, and I didn't look at these things. But I think the tension comes from something deeper. Okay. Sorry, I missed something. And awareness. Okay. So sometimes it simply means you're becoming aware. Okay. So trying to understand the world does not mean you are participating in darkness. Again, vibration. Sometimes it simply means you are becoming more aware. But again, it's not simple. It's the vibrational aspect of it. And awareness, when it is balanced with wisdom and grounding, that's what we're trying to get to. Awareness balanced with wisdom and grounding can actually strengthen our ability to stay aligned with our values. The more clear I get, but I've had to go through this dark night of the soul of the world because I'm looking at it. I've had to go through that in dark night for myself, dark night of the soul for myself, to realize how much I participated in it because I just didn't know, you know? And again, I'm only scratching the surface here. So, but I think the tension comes from something deeper. When we become aware of difficult things, we sometimes worry that awareness itself might somehow contaminate us. Yeah, because of the vibration. And that's a fear that many spiritually sensitive people have. But curiosity and participation are not the same thing. Understanding something does not mean you support it. In many cases, understanding something helps people respond more consciously to the world around them. So that's what I'm trying to get to. My ultimate goal is to get very clear about what the world's been about and where it's going. Well, even more just what it's been about, so that when I'm living in the present moment, because that's all I can do, is see it with clarity, and then respond consciously from that clarity. But like, if I were to respond to everything I've done to respond to whatever's going on in the world my whole life was not done from clarity. It was done from fear. It just wasn't. It was done from resistance, which is fear. So now I'm seeing that, but now I can respond from, and you know what's very interesting when you watch that second video, if you watch the video about the synagogue that I posted below, you can, he tells you about a rule. It's not a law, but basically okay, so I guess there's a term called noticer. I'm a noticer. I notice things, right? He literally points out that they have now put into some kind of, I don't know where it's at. It has something to do with our federal government, though. If you notice, if you're a noticer, then you are anti-Semite, you are a bigot, whatever. You're not allowed to notice. Like, what the hell does that mean? You're not allowed to notice. Why would they have to put that down? I mean, the brainwashing around this is incredible. So just me even saying the word notice here, notice, who knows? Like, our channel is small enough, so maybe they wouldn't. But what the hell? See what I mean about getting clear? It's like, that is an actual thing, you guys. The term noticer, if you use, like, I'm a noticer, then you are an anti-Semite, I guess. Because you're not allowed to notice that the Israeli government is doing things that they shouldn't be doing. If you notice that, then you must not support Judaism, which is completely not true. It's completely separated. It's mind-boggling. And at the same time, quite interesting. It's like, are you kidding me right now? It's quite interesting. But again, I'm in clarity right now, so I can feel that. When you're not in clarity, it's not interesting at all. It's not interesting at all. It's effing crazy is what it is. Okay, so spiritual tools are not automatically dark. So part of my journaling is, we talked about this yesterday, about the spiritual tools are not automatically dark. And you guys had such amazing suggestions about it being about intention, and that's absolutely true. I'm so glad you offered that to me. Another thought that surfaced in my journal reflection had to do with spiritual practices. Okay. I mentioned earlier in the series that I use tools like pendulums, oracle cards, and dowsing rods as part of my spiritual practice, which would be very hard probably for people who follow Catholicism. So for their own reasons, but you want to question, question everything. Even question what you've read in the Bible. There are things in the Bible I'm certain are true, but there are things in the Bible I'm certain are not true as well. I'm certain of it. So question everything, okay? Just as I am. I'm questioning everything I've ever believed, And recently I found myself wondering something. Could practices like dowsing rods, all that, somehow be misunderstood or associated with things that are not aligned with the light. The question came up because when you start exploring conversations about the occult, which I don't really want to, but the Epstein stuff has kind of made us do it, spiritual traditions and different practices throughout history, you begin to realize that humanity has always had many different ways of interacting with the spiritual world. And sometimes those conversations can make people question their own practices. But when I reflected on it more deeply, something becomes aware. Tools themselves are neutral. And that actually came from you guys. The community shared that. A pendulum's a tool. Oracle cards are just tools. Dowsing rods are tools. And if you clear them, which is why you do, you clear them with your own higher light energy, higher vibration, and you set the right intention around them, then the tools become what you want them to become. If you set them with dark intentions and dark energy, the tools become what you want them to become, right? Is basically what you're saying. The tools are neutral, right? When you look at human history, almost every spiritual tradition has some form of tool or method that people use to connect with the spiritual world. In fact, my understanding is there are some Bibles that were written that have darker energy on them. So it's the same thing with the Bible. So some traditions use prayer beads, of course, the Stations of the Cross, that is a tool, but there could be dark and light depending on your intentions through that. That's making sense to me now. Some traditions use meditation. Some traditions use sacred text, like Judaism does, and so does Catholicism. Some traditions use symbolic objects, the cross with Jesus on it. We won't go there, but what I've learned from somebody, and I asked the SGs about how Jesus feels about being stuck on a cross that people are worshiping. He doesn't feel too good about it. How would you like your energy to be stuck on a cross, suffering, which I'm not saying is true. The SGs have said it's true. I'm not saying it's true. That's going to hurt people. That's going to be hard for some people to hear. Yeah, I heard it and it kind of freaked me out too, because I've sat in a church many times looking at him on the cross. So, you got to think about everything we're doing, everything. That is why right now is so challenging, So the intention behind the tool matters. Just flipping around. In my own practice, before I ever began using any of the tools, I do say that prayer. We talked about that yesterday. Okay. So you guys know the prayer that I use. So the deeper realization is one thing I'm realizing as this conversation unfolds, as you've noticed all the other things I've been realizing, is that asking questions is not the same as losing your spiritual grounding. But it can be. It can be if we're not careful. Just like the tools can be used negatively if you're not careful. It's the same thing. In fact, sometimes asking questions is part of strengthening it. Because if your spiritual alignment is real, it should be able to exist in a complex world. So that's one of the things that AI had offered to me, is that I am actually going through sort of a more integrated spirituality with the world that I'm living in versus a more simple spirituality. They shouldn't call it simple, but something else. So more integrated spirituality. It's like just a deeper level. I don't know, what would you guys call it? What language have you used or heard about that? Is like, really seeing what's going on in the world and kind of bringing them all in, but staying grounded, right? That's just not the world I've been living in. That's not the world I've been living in. I've been living in my own little higher ed bubble my whole life. I go outside the world like, that's what you guys are talking about? I was aware of that. But I have been living in a higher ed bubble, which means continuing education my entire life, 30 years. And I worked at a Catholic college. And I'm not Catholic. But this Catholic college was started by nuns. They believe in all human rights, even LGBTQ plus. They believe in all human rights. The Catholic college. There are Catholic practices out there like that, if you don't know that. So that is the world. I lived in that bubble. So when I come out here, because I'm not in that bubble anymore, I come out here and I'm looking at what everybody else has been talking about for 50 years, or the things that have actually been happening. And I'm like, holy, it's like I'm a freaking infant. And you guys know what I really love, actually. I've heard people say that, the United States, we are infants, you guys. Please understand that. When you look around the world, China is not an infant. There's a reason China is the way it is, because as a civilization, they have been around so much longer than the United States. We are toddlers. We are toddlers. Okay? So they know. So, people poo-poo the way that they live their lives. And I'm not saying things are perfect there. I don't really know. I'd have to dig into that. I don't really know. I don't know if what we've been told is actually true. Okay? That's all I'm going to say. People who have gone there and actually studied it, they know. I don't. But what I'm saying is, I love that perspective that the U.S., we are toddlers. That's why we act like toddlers. We're toddlers. That's why we act like toddlers. And it would behoove us to actually ask our seniors, people whose civilizations have been around much longer than ours has. It would behoove us to learn from them. But toddlers don't do that. Toddlers say, what do toddlers do? What do 2-year-olds do? And my sister has a 2-year-old that she is with most days right now, 5 days a week, her grandchild. And she has said to me over and over again, you don't argue with a 2-year-old. You don't try to compromise with a 2-year-old. That's not what they do. That is how we're acting. And when you understand that, when I heard that, I thought, oh, that makes so much sense. But toddlers don't go and seek out either. They don't seek out. So it will be very nice when the United States, but what has to happen to toddlers? They fall down, they skin their knees, they cry, and eventually they get picked up. But sometimes they fall down and things really fall. They might be building a little thing of blocks and the blocks completely fall down. And guess who helps them up? They're seniors. They're seniors. Like, Iran is an adult, let's say. I don't know the difference in time period with Iran and China, but they are adults, if not seniors. So Israel is the youngest, the absolute youngest of all of us. Israel, the state of Israel, not Jewish people, the state of Israel is the youngest of all of us. They are infants. They're infants. And what do we have going on right now? We have the infants of the world and the toddlers of the world working together. Yeah, that's brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant. See, when you just realize that, when you just go, oh my God, what the hell? What are we doing? You know what I mean? When you just realize that, then you can say, oh, okay, well, they're not bad. They're not bad. They're just toddlers. They're just infants. This is how infants and toddlers behave, right? And the seniors of the world sit back, which they've been doing, and letting the toddlers and the infants of the world grow up. And I have a feeling that the little houses, the blocks that we've put together as infants and toddlers are going to come down hard, because that's what infants and toddlers do. They fall down hard. And then the seniors, my sister taking care of her 2-year-old, picks her up, gives her a hug, and says, I know it's been hard. I know. Oh, that must be. And, into the senior, the little crash that of the blocks means nothing, means nothing. So if you can imagine the civilizations that have been around so much longer are looking at us and saying, we see you, we know what's going on, because they've been through it. They've been through it. And my understanding is longer than when Christ visited, when Jesus came here. Longer than that. So I think I should just end with that. Boom, boom. That wasn't part of my script. So let's see what else we got here. And then I'm going to end here. Okay. What does Mabel want me to say based on everything I've been talking about? Okay, so the deeper realization. One thing I'm realizing as this conversation unfolds is that asking questions is not the same as losing your spiritual grounding. Okay, we talked about that. In fact, sometimes asking questions is a part of strengthening it. Because if your spiritual alignment is real, it should be able to exist in a complex world. I think that's key. It should be able to exist in a complex world. It should be able to face difficult realities without collapsing your spiritual grounding. Well, I've been collapsing, so my grounding hasn't been that strong, but I have to see things clearly in order for my grounding to be strong. And I think that's part of what many people are trying to figure out right now. How do we remain compassionate and spiritually grounded while also becoming more aware of the complexity of the world we're living in? I don't think there's a simple answer to that, but I do think it's a meaningful question. So before we close today's conversation, let's just summarize, which is not going to be actually possible. It's just part of what Mabel wrote for me, because, I brought up so many more things than what the outline had discussed. So the difference between curiosity and participation, the idea that understanding something does not mean supporting it, the role that intentions plays is in spiritual practices and tools. Yeah, for sure. Okay, you guys, so let me know what you think, and I will see you tomorrow for the continuation of this conversation. I hope it's helpful. All right, take care. Bye-bye.